Throughout their history, the country of Russia has had many atrocities that's happened there, but some claim that some of the worst were done by a man named the Butcher of Rostov. This is the story of Andrei Chikatilo. Welcome to Enter the Dark. Hello and welcome to Enter the Dark. I am Yam from Film Daddy. With me as always is Les from Tales from the Hangman. How's it going, Les?
All good, man, all good. Hello, everyone.
Right then, guys. Well, once again, thank you all for hitting that subscribe button. We are very happy that you do that for us. Like we said, you don't have to, but you do, so that makes us feel nice and warm inside and gives us a tingling sensation in our pants. He's got this nodding smile on your face like, yes, it does.
Yes.
Now I've got a semi right now.
It's twitching.
So, today, we're doing Chicky Baby.
Chicky.
He is a chicky boy.
We are the Chicky Boys.
No,
stop.
No. Yeah, we are doing Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo. Now, if you haven't heard of this guy, he is fucking crazy. Some of this stuff that he got up to. And obviously, we're going to go into great detail with all of it for you. But Les, what do you know about him?
Russian, Soviet Union.
I said, what do you know about him, not what do you know about a country?
Oh, right. So, yeah, he's Russian. That's a big one. And he was a big bloke and liked a bit of cannibalism.
Let's just get into this so we can educate Les a bit more for it. So, let's get going. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born on the 6th of October 1936 in Yablochny, a small Ukrainian farming village.
Shit, so he would have been present during World War II, then. This would have been a living memory for this man.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, he would. Also, I'm going to butcher every place name here. He was born in the midst of Joseph Stalin's campaign to communise all of the rural land. And Stalin, being Stalin, that meant taking it by force, because he loved a bit of force.
He did love a bit of force, didn't he?
Yeah, so this meant that Andrei was introduced to death and destruction at a very young age. When he was 5, his mother told him that 7 years earlier, his older brother, Stefan, had disappeared and the family believed he had been kidnapped and eaten by neighbours. The story had a profound effect on the small child, who later admitted he often imagined what had been done to his brother. Why would you say that to your kid?
Yeah, it's like, where's Stefan? He
was taken by the neighbours and eaten.
Yeah, like, thanks. So it wasn't anything else like a bear. No, it was the neighbours.
You know, the ones who still live there. Fucking parents for you. When World War II broke out, Chikatilo's father, Roman, was conscripted into the army. After he was captured by the Germans, he did not return home until well after the war had ended. When he did return, he was branded a traitor by the Stalinist regime for allowing himself to be caught.
Oh, of course.
Andrei was only 10 when his father returned, and because he was a devout communist, he openly criticised his father for his betrayal to the state.
Oh, of course.
I love that.
Yeah.
He's like, Andrei, I am home. He's like, Father, welcome home. You are traitor to state. You disgust me. I spit on you. Mother Russia, love you. Hate father. Andrei was an academic child who preferred reading than playing with his peers. Now, his favourite books were about the Russian partisans who fought the Germans, and he especially loved the story of how the partisans had captured several German prisoners and had taken them to a forest and tortured them.
Nice children's books, then.
They are, yeah. Well, you know, fairy tales are a bit dark. It's cutting out the middleman here, isn't he? He's not sort of like, oh, and Goldilocks. It's like, no, took her to the forest, tortured the fuckers. You know, he's just getting into it.
Yeah.
Because of his quiet ways and almost effeminate demeanour, Chikatilo had few friends and he was constantly teased as a kid. He was extremely nearsighted, and because he feared that wearing glasses would lead to more teasing, he refused to admit that he needed them. It would be nearly 20 years before he wore his first pair.
Short-sighted of him.
Nearsighted. There you go. Joke number 1. One other fact that he took great pains to hide was the fact that he was a chronic bedwetter. When he reached his teens, much of the teasing stopped, probably due to the fact that he'd grown taller and stronger and become known as an avid reader with an excellent memory. So the kids are like, You're clever, aren't you? Yeah, do my homework. And he's like, yes, I will do homework efficiently, because in Soviet Russia, homework does you.
But he could also snap you in two.
Yeah. By the time he was 16, he was the editor of the school newspaper and the political information officer, a role that gave him additional prestige. Sounds like a bit of a fucking nerd to me.
And a grass.
Yeah.
I'm guessing a big grass.
He's going to be a grass, ain't he?
It's Stalinist Russia. Snitches don't get snitches. Fuck's sake.
You mean snitches don't get stitches? They'd get commendations from state. Anyway, while his political life developed, his social skills were virtually non-existent, especially with the ladies. He turned 18 and he applied to Moscow University to study law. He failed the entrance exam, but blamed his rejection on his father's humiliating war record. I am clever boy. You did not take me because father is deserter. He allowed himself to be captured. They spit on you, father. Love Mother Russia. As he matured, he became more confident with women, but several early attempts at sex failed when he was unable to achieve an erection. He became convinced that he was impotent, so he did what any of us would do, and became obsessed with masturbation. Don't think it works. Give it a try. If your car ain't working...
Go jumpstart it a few times.
Yeah, try to turn it over. Sometime later, while on national service, he attempted to have sex with a woman who was not interested in his advances. As the woman struggled, Chikatilo overpowered her only to release her shortly after when he realised that he jizzed inside his pants. Inadvertently, he discovered that fear and violence excited him more than the sexual act itself, and also how to get jizz stains out of your underwear.
Yeah, did they have Daz in Soviet Russia?
They had Darren Aronovsky. He was a great washer. A few years after completing his national service, he moved to Russia in search of work. He quickly found a job as a telephone engineer in a small town of Rodinovo Nevsvetyevsky. Nailed it. Just north of Rostov. When he saved enough money, he sent for his parents and sister and moved them into his new home. Father, you may come, but you're still disgrace. Mother brings sister. I have house now, unlike father, who is disgrace.
You sit on beanbag. That's all you get.
You sit on floor. You do not sit on chair. Hate your father with Mother Russia. A couple of years later, his sister Tatiana introduced him to a woman called Faina. A relationship developed, and they were married in 1963.
Oh, that's nice.
It is, yeah. Faina quickly learned that her new husband was not only unable to consummate the marriage, but he had no real interest in sex. But Faina being Faina, she saw this as nothing more than intense shyness, and finally managed to coax him into having intercourse with her. She's like, come on, come on, little guy. That's it. Tickle you under the chin. Ooh, you're getting bigger. Ooh, I have to be careful. That might make you sick.
Ooh, you're shorter and grower.
Eventually, they had two children, a girl named Lyudmila, born in 1965, and a boy named Yuri in 1969.
Oh, nice.
The year that Mother Russia fared against American capitalist pigs to get to moon. Not long after his marriage, Chikatilo enrolled in a correspondence course with Rostov Liberal Arts University, and in 1971 gained degrees in, you ready for this, Russian literature, engineering, and Marxism-Leninism. I think that was just like everyone had to get.
I was going to say, liberal arts in Soviet Russia. That was a thing.
The liberal arts are what we tell you are liberal. Got to teach them somehow. Yeah. These are the disgusting things the capitalist pig dog like. With his new qualifications, Chikatilo became a teacher at the This is the best name for a school. You ready?
Ready.
This is the most fucking Soviet name for a school. He became a teacher at Vocational School number 32. in Novoshakhtinsk. Vocational School number 32. Almost from the beginning, his teaching career was a disaster. His chronic shyness made it impossible for him to teach and control his pupils. He was constantly humiliated and ridiculed, not only by his students, but the other staff members too, who thought of him as odd. He's being picked on by kids and people here. Despite being picked on by children, teachers, and anyone else who came across him probably, he stuck with teaching. He later admitted that he found the company of young children sexually aroused him. His fascination started out as simple voyeurism outside the school toilets, but quickly spiraled into indecent assaults on both male and female students. When parents began to complain, Chikatilo was forced to resign and move on to other schools. Just resign and move on.
Yeah.
Like a Catholic priest. At one of the schools, Chikatilo was put in charge of the boys' dormitory.
Ooh, fox among the hens.
Yeah, schoolboy error. As usual, the kids ignored him or openly teased him. Some months later, after he was caught trying to fillet a sleeping boy, he was attacked and beaten by several senior students. He got beat up by kids. From that point on, Chikatilo carried a knife. He was never reported to the proper authorities, mainly because under the Soviet regime of the time, an indiscretion by a single teacher could reflect on the entire faculty.
Oh, shit.
So it'd be like, one teacher suck off boy, whole teachers suck off all boys. You are disgusting. You do not love Mother Russia. In 1978, Chikatilo moved his family back to Shakhty, and soon after he bought a shack near the river and lured his first victim, 9-year-old Lena Zakhanova, a beautiful and doll-like little girl, who was unfortunate enough to cross paths with the Ripper of Rostov. Yeah, he brought a shack in Shakhty. It's like buying a hack in Hackney.
Yeah.
Innit? Once inside the shack, he pinned her down by the throat and attempted to rape her, rupturing her hymen.
Ooh.
The otherwise impotent Andrei Chikatilo immediately experienced an orgasm at the sight of her blood and began stabbing her with an ice pick.
Fuck, that escalated.
He did, he's like, oh, stab. Andrei Chikatilo continued teaching until he was made redundant in 1981. No longer you suck off children. You take this money and go.
Made redundant.
Probably was. They were probably like, you're a shit teacher. You literally are redundant. Go. Unable to get another teaching job, he found employment as a supply clerk for the Rostov, a local industrial complex. The job meant he had to travel to other parts of the country to purchase supplies for the factory. It was these periods away from home that gave him ample time for search for new victims. 6 months later, he killed again. So this was Larissa Tkachenko, who was a runaway from a boarding school and was completely different to the other girls that Chikatilo was used to dealing with. At 17, she was older than the others and was already sexually experienced.
Oh.
She was used to dating young soldiers and didn't mind swapping sexual favours for a meal and a few drinks.
I mean,
who does?
Yeah,
who doesn't? Yeah. So when Andrei Chikatilo approached her at a bus stop with a similar offer, she went with him without hesitation. He took her to a deserted stretch of woodland and, unable to contain himself, began tearing her clothes off. Larissa panicked and tried to fight off her attacker, but Chikatilo quickly overpowered her and beat her with his fists. To stop her... To his fists. He's going to have big fists anyway.
Big hammy fists.
Big ham hocks. So, to stop her from screaming, he filled her mouth with dirt and strangled her. He then bit off one of her nipples and ejaculated over her corpse. He would later tell police that he had danced with joy around the body until he had settled down enough to cover her body with branches and hide her clothes.
That's proper weird, that is.
She was found the next day. Of course he's weird. He's just fucking bit a nipple off, jizzed over and then danced around naked going, I got an erection.
Why the dancing?
Well, if you can't get it up and then you manage to, you probably feel like dancing.
That's never happened, as we know by my track record. I'm not a criminal.
She used it twice, 2 kids. Chikatilo was excited with his latest conquest. While his first victim had left him frustrated and confused, the second had given him the appetite that he found hard to satisfy. In June 1982, while on another business trip, wink wink, to the town of Zaplavskaya, he killed 13-year-old Lyubia Biryuk after following her from a bus stop. I can't say Russian names, leave me alone.
It's hard.
After a failed attempt at rape, he produced a knife and stabbed her repeatedly, including several wounds to her eyes. Because of the warm summer conditions, her body was almost a skeleton when it was found just 2 weeks later.
That's hot then.
Yeah, Russia. Soviet Russia.
Blows hot then cold.
Yeah.
A bit like Chicky Boy.
Chicky baby. Over the next year, Chikatilo claimed 6 more victims, but the killings were slightly different. 2 of the victims were young males, a fact that was to cause great confusion for investigating police. With virtually no experience in serial murder and serving under a regime that refused to admit that such crimes were possible in the Soviet Union, the police began looking for 2 separate offenders. So yeah, the Soviet Russia like, these crimes do not happen here. They only happen in America.
Good police force then.
Yeah.
Not as impotent as Chikatilo then.
Well, even though the crime scenes and the manner of death were similar, no links were established as the two victims had been killed outside of the Rostov area.
Killers don't move around. That would be stupid.
They do not move. We moved them. After killing another 10-year-old girl in December, Chikatilo did not kill for another 6 months. His next victim was Laura Sarkisyan, a 15-year-old Armenian girl whose body was never recovered until years later when Chikatilo confessed and directed police to her grave. He quickly learned how to choose his victims carefully. His travels took him to many railway and bus stations where he was able to coerce young vagrants of both sexes to go with him. Mostly it was a promise of food or similar treats that lured him then to isolated tracts of forest that bordered most Russian towns. On some occasions, the victims offered sexual favours in advance. Either way, once they were with him, they were pretty much doomed. An added advantage of preying on vagrants in Russia was that nobody reported their mission, because, officially, there were no vagrants in Russia.
No.
There was nobody homeless in Russia. They only became known when the bodies were found.
Well, that was inconvenient, wasn't it?
It was, but then they're dead, so it doesn't matter. We have to find who killed these people. It was efficient. Before the summer was over, Chikatilo had claimed 3 more victims. Lodia Kutsaba, a 24-year-old female, and an unidentified woman aged between 18 and 25, and a 7-year-old boy, Igor Gudkov, who was savagely butchered. By September 1983, the total number of victims had risen to 14, of which 6 had been found. The Central Moscow militia, concerned by the number of dead children that were being reported by the local police, sent Major Mikhail Fetisov and his team to Rostov to take over the investigation. Soon after his arrival, Fetisov reviewed the situation and sent a scathing report to his superiors in Moscow, criticising the ineptitude of the local police and suggesting that all 6 murders were the work of a single sex-crazed monster.
Well, he was switched on, wasn't he?
Moscow headquarters reluctantly accepted his findings, but fell short of calling the perpetrator a serial killer, as that was seen as a purely Western phenomenon and not possible in Russian culture.
No, not at all. Not at all. Ivan the Terrible.
They say it's not possible, but it's the wrong term I'd use, because Rostov alone recorded over 400 homicides a year.
During the Soviet time?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, as most of the murders seem to centre around the Rostov area, particularly Shakti Fetisov and his deputy, Vladimir Kolynesyov, decided to assemble a special squad that would focus its investigation on that area. To lead the squad, Fetisov selected Viktor Burakov, an experienced forensic analyst who is considered by many to be the most talented crime scene investigator in the department.
Mm-hmm.
Soon after the appointment, Burakov and his team moved into a separate office in the militia headquarters building in Rostov. In line with the Soviet bureaucracy, the new subunit was given a fucking awesome name.
What was it?
It was the Division of Especially Serious Crimes.
Seriously? That's the real name?
Yeah, the Division of Especially Serious Crimes.
It's especially serious.
As most of the bodies had been recovered from woodlands, the case was unofficially known as the Lesopolosa, or the Forest Strip Killings.
They're good with their naming conventions, aren't they, the Russians?
The Division of Especially Serious Crimes.
Right. The strip courses.
A fucking awesome name, that is. If you're like going to be in a police force, and you're like, you got this team, what do you want to be in? Homicide or the Division of Especially Serious Crimes? Like, fucking the Division. You could call it like Desk. D-E-S-C. Desk, yeah. So, believing that the person responsible for the killings was abnormal.
Wow. Yeah.
Fucking well done, detective.
But it doesn't happen in Soviet Russia, does it?
That's why it's abnormal.
Yeah.
Because it's abnormal. It's probably thinking it's an American or something. The team began to search through records of mental hospitals, looking for anyone whose behaviour patterns and history indicated an inclination towards crimes involving sex and violence.
Oh.
Crime records were also checked for known sexual offenders or anyone questioned in relation to similar offences in the past. Now, the task, as you can imagine, was long and arduous, as each person that matched the criteria had to be interviewed, have their movements at the time of the offensive checked, and blood samples taken for matching. The samples of semen taken from the victims indicated the killer had type AB blood.
Oh.
If any of the suspects matched, they were detained for further questioning. Those who didn't were released. So at least they're doing that.
Oh, does it say how many were like held?
Hashtag we'll get to that.
Oh.
They didn't have computers to sort all this information on. There was masses and masses. So the details of suspects were interviewed, were handwritten on index cards and kept in boxes. One of the cards recorded that Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo had been interviewed but was released when his blood type failed to provide a match. We'll get to it. But soon the police picked up a suspect acting suspiciously near the Rostov streetcar depot and brought him in for questioning. So you're thinking now, it's Chikatilo? No. The suspect was named Shaburov. And he was no nice way to say it. He was obviously retarded. Okay, and he soon confessed to stealing a car with 4 other men. Not long after, he confessed that he and his friends had also killed several children. His friends were then arrested, and the 4 were questioned extensively for 24 hours. The 4 men, who he'd met at a school for the mentally retarded, that's a Russian name for it.
Is that literally what it's called?
For the mentally retarded. Readily confessed to the 7 Forest Strip murders, even though they were unable to provide any details of the victims or their locations.
Was it like, you'll do?
No. Have you done it? Yeah? Okay. Several months later, when fresh murders were still committed while the suspects were in the custody, the police believed that they were dealing with a gang of madmen and rounded up several other retarded young men for questioning.
How convenient.
The questioning, in quotation marks, was apparently brutal and unrelenting, resulting in the death of one of the suspects and another committing suicide while in custody.
Oh, fuck.
So what you got to think of here is these are people who've got learning difficulties and they're being beaten and shouted at saying, we know you killed these children. They have no idea what's going on.
By Soviets who are probably very, very comfortable. Like, I could do this all day.
Well, eventually, as the murders continued, the gang theory was dropped and the boys were released. One other theory that they had was the killer worked as a driver for one of the many factories in the area, which would explain how he was able to cover such large areas in a short time. To check the theory, anyone who held a driver's license and drove as part of their job was checked. In all, over 150,000 people were interviewed before this line of inquiry was also abandoned.
That's a shit line of inquiry.
Anyone who's got a driver's license and drives for a living.
That's like saying, oh, well, they've covered such a wide distance. We're looking for people with really long legs.
I mean, though, it's not like Russia was... This is when Russia was the biggest country in the world. You know, there's going to be lots of people. Fuck's sake. They should have known. They should have known, like, you know, they've got not got computers. They've got to do all this by hand. Sheer laziness should have said to him, don't want to do this. I mean, it would have done to me.
Yeah, same here. And I guess that's that Soviet determination. But not determination to do a good job.
The Soviet can-do attitude.
Yeah.
By September 1984, the investigation failed to uncover any usable evidence. The fact that the blood type was shared by 10% of the European men meant that it alone was very little help unless they were able to find someone to match it to. To make matters worse, the murders were accelerating at an alarming rate. From January to September, 15 new murders had been committed, 11 of them during the summer period alone.
Jesus.
It's proper ramping up the efforts here, isn't it?
Yeah.
In an effort to narrow down the possibilities, Burakov enlisted the aid of several psychologists and sexual pathologists from the Rostov Medical Institute and asked them to prepare a profile of the killer. Most of the specialists that were consulted refused to assist the police on the basis that they did not have sufficient information on which to base their analysis. Which, fair enough.
Yeah.
Like, we can't do a proper job for this for you, so we can't do it. Only one psychiatrist, Alexander Bukhanovsky, offered his help and agreed to provide a profile of the Forest Strip killer. Bukhanovsky didn't have much to base his analysis on. Obviously, the killer was a sexual deviant, approximately 5'10" tall, 25 to 50 years old, shoe size of 10 or more, and had a common blood type. After studying the police files, Bukhanovsky gave the opinion that the killer probably suffered from some form of sexual inadequacy and brutalised his victims to compensate for it. Pretty much bang on there.
Yeah.
While the information provided another means of identification, the killer would first have to be caught. In order to do that, Burakov arranged for additional men to patrol the bus, tram and train stations. One location that received more attention than most was the bus station in Rostov. Not only was it the busiest in the district, but it was also the last known location of two of the victims. Alexander Zanavovsky, a local police inspector with an intimate knowledge of the location, was given the job of patrolling the area. His task was to look for anyone acting suspiciously around the commuters, especially young women and boys. Towards the end of one of the first days of the observation, Zanusovsky noticed a middle-aged man wearing glasses whom, although wandering aimlessly through the crowd, was paying particular attention to young girls. After observing the man for some time, Zanusovsky approached him and asked him for his identity papers. The man seemed nervous when approached and told the inspector that he'd been away on a business trip and he was just on his way home.
Fair enough.
Zanusovsky scrutinised the documents, including a red card which identified the man as a freelance employee of the Department of Internal Affairs, a division of the KGB.
Aha!
Finding that they were in order, the policeman handed back the papers, apologised for the interruption and left. "Thank you for your time. I am sorry for any inconvenience to your day."
And then off to the side, it's like, oh shit.
As he walked away, Zanusovsky had the uneasy feeling that that man, Andrei Chikatilo, was hiding something, and it wasn't a boner.
How was he working for the KGB? Or had he forged that? What?
Several weeks later, Zanusovsky was again patrolling the bus station in the company of another police officer. Both men were in street clothes. Late in the afternoon, just as they were about to finish their shift, Zanusovsky saw Chikatilo again. Alerting his partner to keep an eye on the man, he moved closer and sat near him and watched from behind a newspaper.
Classic.
Don't know if he had eye holes cut in the paper.
I hope he did. He was wearing a fedora.
Yeah, and a fake beard.
But they have fedoras. No, it would have been one of them bear hats, wouldn't it?
What are they called?
What, them Russian hats?
Yeah.
I just call them Russian hats.
When Chikatilo moved, Zanusovsky and his partner followed. For several hours they followed Chikatilo as he boarded several buses that travelled around the district before returning to the bus station. As they watched, Chikatilo approached women of different ages and attempted to engage them in conversation. Often he was rebuffed, but he continued to approach others. The pursuit continued into restaurants, bars, and back to the station. All the way, Chikatilo only seemed to have one thing on his mind: talking to women.
That's the only thing on his mind.
Bit of a player, ain't he?
Yeah, he's a big man about town.
At one stage, he made himself comfortable in a chair and he dozed off for 2 hours.
Who, Chikatilo?
Yeah, he just had a kip. And these guys are just sitting there with the newspapers watching him like, "Suspect sleeping like a baby." When he woke up, he resumed his previous activities. Sometime later, a young woman sat down next to him and engaged him in conversation. The talk seemed to go well, as shortly after, Chikatilo put his arm around the woman. Finally, she laid her head in his lap, and Chikatilo slid his hand inside her blouse and fondled her. The girl, who seemed intoxicated, didn't object.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a floozy.
Chikatilo seemed flushed with arousal. A few minutes later, the girl sat up and spoke harshly to him, and soon after, they parted company. I don't know what he said to her. He's already copping a feel. He's like, "You can't really fuck this up." He was like, "I'm impotent." He's like, "Well, there's no point in carrying this on, is there?" He walks off and he's
You're
like,
just a tease.
He's like, "I shouldn't mention my impotence."
I value honesty above all things.
The party would want me to be honest with you. Zanusovsky could wait no longer and approached Chikatilo and again asked for his papers. "Hello, man I've never met before. Give me papers." When he learned that he had been observed for some time and he was under arrest, Chikatilo was shocked and began to sweat profusely.
Oh, that nervous sweating.
Yeah. Zanusovsky then asked to see the contents of the man's briefcase. Chikatilo reluctantly agreed and opened it. It contained a length of rope, a jar of Vaseline, and a long-bladed knife.
Always with the Vaseline.
Well, you know, if you're going to go out with some Vaseline. You never know.
Yeah, and a long-bladed knife.
And a bit of rope.
Bit of rope.
Maybe he was like, "I saw goat stuck in fence, so I tied rope to legs and put Vaseline around the neck, and then I pulled the goat and it was free.
And I fucking murdered it.
And then I used a knife to cut rope to let the goat go free, because it was not mine, it was street property. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, under normal circumstances, no Russian citizen can be held for more than 72 hours. In Chikatilo's case, though, the detectives needed additional time to check his background, so they decided to charge him with harassing women in public places. Although it was only a minor charge, it carried a maximum sentence of 15 days imprisonment, giving them more time to investigate further.
Fair enough.
And this is when they hit the mother lode.
Ooh.
Oh, yes. After checking the police files, they discovered that Chikatilo was under investigation for the theft of a roll of linoleum and a car battery from a factory.
What's linoleum?
Lino. You're laughing, but in Russia, the charge of stealing state property was considered a serious crime and meant that investigators would have the luxury of keeping him in jail for as many months as they wanted to.
Get in.
As it took to check his background in detail. As his history unfolded, police learned of his penchant for children, particularly girls. They uncovered the classroom incidents, his acts of voyeurism, and the sexual assault of the boy in the dormitory, where he got his ass kicked after. Several people who lived in the vicinity of his secret shack reported that he used it to entertain prostitutes and spoke of his habit of stalking the corridors of trains.
Wow.
He has prostitute there, and he goes up and down the train corridor, stalking people.
How did they know about the train, though? The shack I can understand.
They probably seen him, haven't they? Hello, Andrei. What have you been doing today? I've been stalking people on train. You go to your secret shack with prostitute? Yes, good.
We're prostitute now.
No, they've got all this evidence, yeah? It seems that, he could be the killer, right? But they couldn't say it was until a blood sample was taken from him and analysed. His blood was found to be type A.
Oh.
Had they taken any samples of his sperm, hair or saliva, they would have actually found his blood type was actually type AB, as the B antigens are not present in the blood in sufficient quantities to provide a positive match.
Now that's interesting, that is.
I will bleed on them, but I won't come on them. The only real evidence they had left were the contents of the briefcase. His Vaseline, his rope and his knife, and the police report of his activities at the train stations. Incredibly, the knife and other items were lost when a local police lieutenant mistakenly returned them to Chikatilo's home. Here is the evidence to convict this man. I will take them to his house, because they do not belong to me. Fucking idiot.
Fucking amateur hour.
So now, they had insufficient evidence to charge him with murders, so they just charged him with the stealing offences, and he was sentenced to 1 year's imprisonment. And the worst thing for him, he was expelled from the Communist Party.
Oh, that is bad.
In December 1984, after serving just 3 months of his original sentence, he was released. Zananovsky was still convinced that Chikatilo was the killer, but he was later demoted for being overly zealous in performance of his duties.
Wait, overly zealous? Was he making all the others look bad? You made them look bad, you'll leave.
No, it was, you failed to get him. You picked on this man. You could not give him. You were overzealous. You fuck off. After celebrating the new year with his family, Chikatilo sought out a new job and was soon employed in a locomotive factory in nearby, for fuck's sake, Novoterask. As before, his new job entailed travel. For the best part of a year, Chikatilo refrained from killing.
Oh, that's good. Like New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, but it wasn't until the business trip to Moscow that he fell off the wagon. On the 1st of August 1985, he completed his duties in the capital. He flew to Rostov, where he made the acquaintance of an 18-year-old mentally retarded girl on the train. He offered her some vodka if she would get off with him at the small station. Not get off as in...
Just get, yeah.
Kissing. Getting off. That's what you call it in England. You get off with someone.
Yeah, you get off
which means get off.
They were getting off by the bike sheds, miss. Smoking silk cut, miss.
Anyway, she agreed and she followed him into the woods near the rail line. Shortly after, she lay dead with 38 stab wounds in her naked body. Chikatilo completed his trip and he went home.
Efficient.
Later that same month, after his return, he met a young woman at the bus station in Shakhty who told him that she had nowhere to sleep. Offering her lodgings in return for sexual favours, he led her into a wooded grove and attempted to have sex with her, but again, he couldn't sustain an erection. When she began to laugh at him, he... She's like, smelly man can't get it up. How you supposed to rape me with the floppy penis? When she began to laugh at him, he killed her and left her body in a field. And that was his last murder for that year. But yeah,
felt a bit down.
And don't laugh. Don't laugh at him. You know, if someone's trying to do that and they can't get it up, don't laugh. You know, kick him in the balls and fucking run. Anyway, for Andrei Chikatilo, the time in jail had been a cleansing time for him. After having been arrested and miraculously released, he was free to pursue one of the most things he desired most: young, innocent victims.
Ugh.
Yeah. While he'd been known the loss of his status as a party member, his new job opened up many new horizons that more than compensated for it. He spent most of 1986 travelling around the country on buying trips for his employer and celebrated his 50th birthday on October the 16th.
Yay!
In May 1987, during a trip to the town of Revelled in the Ural Mountains, he killed a 13-year-old boy after luring him from a train station.
Not so good.
That's not good. In July, another trip to Zaporozhye in the Ukraine resulted in the murder of another boy that had followed him into the woods. The attack was so brutal that part of the knife blade broke off and was later found at the scene by police.
Jesus Christ.
The next trip to Leningrad in September resulted in the death of yet another boy. While Chikatilo continued to travel and kill, the police investigation was starting to gain a bit of momentum. In 1985, Issa Kostoyev, the director of Moscow's Department for Violent Crime, that's not such a cool name, is it?
No.
But it was unofficially called the Killer Department.
Yeah.
Had taken over the case and reorganised his investigators into 3 teams. One group concentrated on Shakhty, another on Rostov, and the third on Novoshashka-Donetsk. His strategy was simple: investigate each murder systematically and focus on the areas surrounding each one. Police work. Anyone who had been convicted of a sexually motivated crime, including those still in custody, were checked in great detail. This one's not so good. All known homosexuals were rounded up and questioned extensively. Sexual pathologists were asked to provide lists of patients for their scrutiny, as were venereal disease clinicians. So, the clinicians were added after pathologists found crab lice on one of the female victims. Crabs as well. All railway workers, whether civilian or military, were checked thoroughly for any discrepancy in their work habits and movements. Every nightclub or pornographic video store in the 3 districts were put under surveillance, in hope that the killer would patronise one or more of them regularly.
I hate it when people patronise porn.
I know, yeah. So like, oh, look at you, making me hard. Oh, look, I'm gonna come now.
Yeah, it's a perfectly valid profession. Don't patronise them.
Kostoyev left no stone unturned in his search for the killer, even to the point of investigating any former police officers who had been dismissed for improper activities. As the years passed, the investigators gleaned enough information to separate the Forest Belt murders from some of the thousands of other similar occurrences.
But they don't happen in Russia.
No, they don't happen. Slowly but surely, reports of additional murders in surrounding districts filtered in. 2 such murders were reported as far away as Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan. Originally, the Tashkent militia weren't going to include one of the victims because her body was so badly mutilated they thought she'd been run over by a harvesting machine.
Oh my god.
We're talking serious fucking mutilation.
Yeah.
By December 1985, Burakov and Kostoyev had organised for all trains in the 3 districts to be controlled by plainclothes militia, or Druzinsky, as the volunteer militia was called. Their instructions was to stop and check documents of anyone who looked suspicious. In addition, army helicopters were used to patrol the railway lines and the adjoining forests from the air. Due to all this attention, Chikatilo ceased his activities for nearly 2 years.
Smart move, I guess.
However, the investigators were later embarrassed to learn that Chikatilo himself, in his capacity as a freelance employee of the Department of Internal Affairs, had been assisting the militia to patrol the trains to look for the killer. Armed with the knowledge that the investigation centred around only 3 areas, he resumed killing in the areas far removed from them. This reminds me of Marcel Petiot.
Yeah, a little
where
bit.
he was in charge of looking for himself.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. In April 1988, Chikatilo killed again. His latest victim was a 30-year-old woman that he had met on a commuter train near the town of Krasny Sulin, where he was sent on business with the local metals factory. After enticing her to a vacant lot to have sex, he stabbed her repeatedly and disfigured her corpse. When her body was found in early April, a single shoe print was clearly evident beside her body. The imprint was at that of size 9 to 10.
That's a big foot, that is.
I'm size 12.
That's even bigger.
During the next year, Chikatilo killed 8 more times. The attacks normally took place when he was travelling around the country on business, but one particular crime occurred at his daughter's apartment in Shakti.
Well, how... What?
It had been empty since his daughter had divorced her husband and moved back in with her parents. After Chikatilo lured 16-year-old Tatiana Ryazov inside, he gave her vodka and seduced her. After stabbing her and violating her body, he realised that he could not leave the body at the house.
Well,
Obviously,
yeah.
He took a kitchen knife and decapitated her and sawed off her legs before wrapping her in rags and articles of clothing. He then tied the bundles to a sled belonging to a neighbour and dragged it through the streets to the area where he dumped the remains. I've got images of him pulling a sled like fucking Charlie Brown. He's just walking along like, "Hello, Andrei. Hello. You been to your daughter's apartment?" "Yes. Got divorced. Very tragic. What you got there?" "Presents." Just fucking dragging a sled.
Good grief.
Hey! Another victim was killed when Chikatilo was on his way to his father's birthday party. Seeing 19-year-old Yelena Varga at the bus stop, he offered to walk her home instead. He lured her to the woods and stabbed her. After cutting out her uterus and slicing off part of her face, he wrapped the remains in her clothing and left for the party. The last victim for the year was 10-year-old boy that Chikatilo had met at the Rostov video shop. He died of multiple stab wounds and was buried in Rostov cemetery by his killer.
Probably rent in red heat.
Well, I'm thinking there. He's buried him in the cemetery. Quite efficient.
Yeah, that is.
You know, we think it's your boy. Shall we just put headstone?
Wanted to go a bit deeper? I don't see point.
The animals not get him. When police recovered the bodies, many of them were missing body parts. Many females were missing their uterus and nipples, and males had genitals, occasionally tongues, sliced or bitten off.
Oh.
The next murder did not take place until January 1990, with 9 more committed before November. In his last year of freedom, Chikatilo seemed to move away from his usual preference of females, with 7 of the 9 victims being young boys aged 7 to 16.
I was going to say he has changed it up a bit, hasn't he? For a while now, he's been going for the boys.
Yeah, but one of his last known victims was the oldest boy, Vadim Tishchenko, whose body was found on November 3rd near Rostov's Leskyoz railway line, a location that had been under heavy scrutiny for months. Ironically, that day it wasn't patrolled due to a manpower shortage, and that was the day that Chikatilo struck. So if there was not a manpower shortage, they would have found him. Oh, those Russians.
Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen.
It's a shame how he carried on.
Much like Chikatilo.
Yeah. After Tishchenko's body was found, a 24-hour surveillance of all train and bus stations in the district was implemented. Police wearing night vision goggles observed commuters looking for anyone that didn't fit. To entice the killer, several young attractive policewomen dressed in provocative clothing walked the platforms and bus queues hoping to attract attention. So, "Hey baby, you want to come to me? You take me to woods? No, I have hotel, and I am a rich man. No. You want to take me? Niet." Another squad of police questioned the ticket sellers at various stations in the district, looking for the person who had sold Tishchenko his ticket, the stub of which had been found next to the body.
Ah, that wasn't smart, was it?
No. Finally, An attendant at the Shakti station recognised the boy's picture and recalled that he had bought a ticket in the company with a tall, neatly dressed, grey-haired man who wore glasses.
Ah.
The attendant also told the police that her daughter had seen a similar man the year before. He had been on a train talking to a young boy, and she overheard the man trying to talk the boy into getting off the train with him, but the boy had refused and run away. The police asked the attendant if they could interview her daughter. She agreed, and the daughter later provided police with a detailed description of the man and told them that he was a regular traveller on the trains and spent a lot of his time trying to pick up young people.
Ah.
Never me, because I am too ugly. Andrei Chikatilo was close to being captured, but not before he took another victim.
Ah.
Goes out swinging. 22-year-old Svetlana Koristik went with him to the woods near Lekshaz station and was beaten, stabbed and mutilated. Chikatilo removed the tip of her tongue and both nipples and ate them at the scene before he covered her naked body with leaves and branches.
How did they know he ate them?
Shit him out. I don't know. He told him. I wasn't there, Les. As he returned to the station, where he saw 4 women and a man standing on a platform. The man, Sergeant Igor Rybakov, a policeman attached to the Forest Belt Task Force, noticed Chikatilo was walking beside the platform, wiping sweat from his face. This rape and mutilation is sweaty work.
Oh, those nipples, they really repeat on me.
When he stepped closer, he noticed that the man had spots of blood on his cheek and earlobe and wore a bandage on the finger of his right hand. He asked Chikatilo for his identity papers, which revealed that he was a senior engineer in the Rostov locomotive factory. He was about to ask more questions when a train arrived and Chikatilo insisted that he be allowed to board. Having no real reason to hold him, Rybakov allowed him to leave and later filed a report on the incident.
At least he did his paperwork.
When the body of Vadim Tishchenko was found, the investigators called for reports of persons acting suspiciously in the area. At that time, Rybakov's report was tabled and the police again focused on the man named Andrei Chikatilo, because he's got a cool name.
Chikatilo. Chikatilo, Chikatilo.
That's Sanford and Son. Chikatilo. Chikatilo. Chief Investigator Kostayev suggested that they check Chikatilo's whereabouts on May 14th, 1988, the day that one of the victims, Ilusha Voronka, was murdered in the city of Ilovaisk. After checking Chikatilo's work records, they discovered that he'd been in the city on business on the same day. It was decided that a squad of plainclothes police would follow Chikatilo and try and catch him in the act. On Tuesday, November 20th, Chikatilo was at work. As his bandaged finger, which had been bitten by one of his victims, was aching badly, he left work and went to a nearby clinic for x-rays. After receiving treatment for the finger, which was broken from the bite...
Ooh, that was a big bite, then, wasn't it?
He went to buy some beer and head home. On the way, he attempted to talk to a young boy, but was scared off when a woman approached. He walked further until he met another boy that he engaged in conversation until the boy was called away by his mother. As he continued on, 3 men in leather jackets approached him and identified themselves as police officers. I imagine them coming down like in fucking with the Jets and the Sharks.
Oh, fucking West Side Story.
Yeah, walking down to you and just going, show me your papers. One of the men then handcuffed him and told him that he was under arrest. He was transported to the office of Mikhail Fetisov at the regional headquarters of the Department of Internal Affairs. Chikatilo, who had made no attempt to resist the arrest, did not speak for the entire trip. On the day that Chikatilo was arrested, he had with him a briefcase containing a knife, a length of rope, and a jar of Vaseline. Exactly the same items he'd been carrying the last time he'd been apprehended 6 years ago.
Were they the same ones?
Probably, yeah, because the policeman nicely returned them home for him. Obviously then Chikatilo left his house on the day he was arrested. He had planned on picking up more than just beer.
Ah.
A search of his apartment found 23 knives, a hammer, and a pair of shoes that were later found to match the footprint next to the unidentified victim found in Krasny Sulin. For years, the police had sought the notorious Forest Belt killer, convinced that they were searching for an extremely violent and dangerous criminal. After the arrest, however, they had trouble believing that the gentle, softly spoken man that sat before them was responsible for the brutal series of crimes that struck fear into the hearts of over 4 million people. Soon after the arrest, Chikatilo was photographed and briefly interviewed before being placed in a KGB isolation cell. That just sounds scary, doesn't it?
Very.
The next day, the interrogation started in earnest. Issa Kosteyev was given the task of questioning the prisoner, but any hopes he had of an early confession were dashed when Chikatilo refused to be led on any questions dealing with rape or murder. He did, however, point out that he had been previously arrested and jailed for a crime he did not commit, the theft of the car battery and linoleum.
So he didn't do that, then?
He's like, I didn't do that. Not only did he profess as innocent of any crime, he went to great pains to point out that Kosteyev had already questioned him in relation to the Forest Strip murders and he'd been cleared of any involvement. 1 week after the interrogation began, Chikatilo wrote a letter addressed to the Prosecutor General of Russia, in which he stated, I felt a kind of madness and ungovernability in perverted sexual acts. I couldn't control my actions because from childhood I was unable to realize myself as a real man and a complete human being. While falling short of a true confession, the statement gave Kosteyev a valuable insight into the mind of the man he was dealing with. The following day, Chikatilo confessed to the sexual assaults on his former students.
Alright.
1 day later, in another letter to the Prosecutor General, he wrote, My inconsistent behaviour should not be misconstrued as an attempt to avoid the responsibility for any acts I have committed. One could argue that even after my arrest, I was not fully aware of the dangerous and serious nature. My case is peculiar to me alone. It is not fear of responsibility that makes me act this way, but my inner psychic and nervous tension. I am prepared to give testimony about crimes, but please do not torment me with their details, for my psyche would not be able to bear it.
Aww.
It never entered my mind to conceal anything from investigation. Everything which I have done makes me shudder. I only feel gratitude to investigating bodies for having captured me. So he's saying, thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing, really. I'm a bit crazy. Thanks for getting me.
But how polite.
It is, yeah, really. But,
And, poor crazy head and no cock.
He's got cock, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
By November 29th, unable to break through the mental barrier that Chikatilo was hiding behind, Kosteyev asked Dr. Bukhanovsky, the psychiatrist, to assist with the interrogation. Bukhanovsky agreed on the understanding that any tapes or notes that he took while interviewing the prisoner were only for his personal use and not to be used as evidence.
Oh, good.
In other words, I'm going to write a book. Kosteyev agreed and the interview began on the November the 30th. Bukhanovsky began with the first session by assuring Chikatilo that because he considered his actions were caused by a mental disorder, he would not only be prepared to explain the process in court, but would be prepared to explain to Chikatilo's family. After organising a meeting between Chikatilo and his wife, during which the prisoner burst into tears, Bukhanovsky turned to the subject of the murders. It wasn't long before Chikatilo began to relate the true story of his involvement in the murders.
Uh-huh.
Later the same day, it was Kosteyev's turn. From that time until December the 5th, Andrei Chikatilo described in chilling detail how he had tracked, raped, and brutally killed 34 of 36 victims whose murders he'd been charged with. 2 more were solved at a later date. As the days progressed, he continued to confess to additional murders, detailing how he had raped, murdered, brutalised his victims, sometimes removing body parts and eating them and drinking their blood. In all, he described the murders of 52 victims, mostly young children. In the months following his confession, Chikatilo was transported across the country to visit the scenes where he had committed the crimes. He was uncannily accurate, not only in locating the dump sites, but in recalling the times, dates and places, what the victims had been wearing at the time, and what knife he had used on them.
Got a good memory.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. It's probably the only time he can get it up, can't he? So.
Yeah.
On most occasions, he demonstrated his method of attack using a dummy, showing the detectives how he stood to one side to avoid being splashed by blood. While on one such trip, Chikatilo remembered another victim, a 20-year-old Latvian girl that he killed in 1984. The final count, an astonishing 53 victims, making him one of the most prolific and brutal serial killers in recorded history.
Yeah. Wow.
Well done him. The trial began on April the 14th, 1992. Chikatilo was led into the courtroom and locked inside a specifically designed cage surrounded by armed guards. Think sort of fucking Hannibal Lecter here.
Specifically designed.
Yeah.
Wow.
The reason for this additional security measure was not so much to contain the prisoner, but rather than to prevent the relatives and friends of the victims from approaching him. The judge appointed to the case, Leonid Azbukathanov, opened the proceedings by reading out the list of indictments against the accused. This process took alone 2 days in full. 2 full days to read out his indictments.
Fuck.
The judge had earlier set a precedent by allowing members of the press full access to the court, a move that was unusual by Russian standards. The move eventually backfired on him when the press printed stories publicly declaring Chikatilo as a murderer long before any evidence was even heard.
Oh, shit. Wow.
You know, they're pretty much convinced.
Yeah.
And he has confessed. So, On April the 16th, the judge allowed Chikatilo to address the court. What followed was 2 hours of rambling, maniacal monologue, seen by many as an attempt by the accused to simulate madness. As the case continued, Chikatilo became more and more outrageous. He constantly interjected and complained loudly about the rats and the levels of radiation in his cell. At one point, he removed his clothes, waving his penis at the crowd, shouting, "Look at this useless thing. What do you think I could have done with that?" He was later removed from the court in handcuffs. He's fucking now windmilling it. Look at it, it's all floppy.
Hitting it off the bars.
Yeah, it's not working.
Like off that scene from The In-Betweeners.
When he's punching
himself.
Yeah. Despite the interruptions, the trial continued. So too did the outbursts. Chikatilo complained the judge was biased, as with the prosecution. Well, the prosecution are going to be biased, aren't they?
Yeah.
He insisted that the judge's female secretary be removed as she was inciting his lust.
Oh, he's got that look in his eye again.
Sometime later, he told the court that he was pregnant and the guards had been hitting him in the stomach to harm his baby.
What?
Despite his pleas, he was judged competent to stand trial. But he became so disruptive that most of the evidence was heard in his absence. Yeah, he was pregnant.
He's pregnant. That's the best. I'm pregnant.
Oh, fucking hell.
If you hit me, it's murder.
By mid-July, the trial was drawing to a close. The final comments of the trial were those of Marat Kaibaluin, Chikatilo's defence attorney. The basis of his defence was that the police had laid the charges based solely on his client's confession. He argued that there was no material evidence linking Chikatilo with any of the crimes, including the knives, which had never been proven as being the murder weapons. When Marat had concluded his remarks, the judge asked Chikatilo if he wanted to address the court. Despite his continual outbursts during the proceedings, he refused to comment.
What? It's like this, you were literally given license to be
To be fair, he's already
fuck.
whipped his dick out and spun it round. You can't really top that, can he?
No.
I'm pregnant! This thing doesn't work!
Would you like to say anything? I got nothing.
I've peaked. With no further evidence to consider, the judge announced the court would adjourn for 2 months for sentencing. As the judge stood to leave the courtroom, a man lunged towards the cage and threw a short iron bar at the prisoner, missing Chikatilo's head by a few inches.
Oh.
The man was a brother of one of the victims, and he was overpowered by guards and led away, but he was later released.
That's good.
Obviously, they understand. You know.
Yeah.
The court reconvened on October the 14th to a packed gallery. Chikatilo was led in his cage, smiling in response to the shouting and jeering from the erupting crowd. The judge called for silence and began to read the verdict. As he read, Chikatilo constantly interrupted until he was led away, only to be brought back to hear the rest of the verdict.
It's like, what? Stop!
Curiously, at one point, the judge agreed with one of Chikatilo's objections, stated that it was the refusal of the Soviet Union to acknowledge that such crimes existed that had contributed to Chikatilo's years of immunity. And the judge agreed, because he's right. It was.
Did that judge's career continue afterwards?
I'm going to say he got a bullet in the head. On October the 15th, 1992, Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was found guilty of 52 counts of murder, one charge of having been dropped owing to insufficient evidence. Probably that one that he just like, oh yeah, I remember this Latvian girl. Chikatilo was then removed from his cage and brought forward to stand before the judge to receive his sentence. As 52 individual death sentences were handed down, and the crowd cheered their approval, the last words of the trial were spoken when the accused turned to the judge and shouted, Fraud! I'm not going to listen to your lies, before being forcibly removed.
Fraud!
16 months later, on Valentine's Day 1994, Andrei Chikatilo, the man referred to as the Butcher of Rostov and Russia's Hannibal Lecter, was executed by a single shot to the back of the neck. So, that was Andrei Chikatilo.
Wow. I heard, right?
Yeah.
I heard. Wasn't there something about the Japanese did a deal with it? This could have been some of the bullshit he was, like, spouting whilst in his cage. But I read somewhere that the Japanese had done some sort of deal with him to have his brain after he was executed.
I have no idea.
Like something like this, to have his brain after he was executed, so that they could do tests on it and like study it. And he agreed with it, and like one of his wishes was not to be shot in the head. I mean, it's convenient, isn't it? The Japanese say they want my brain, you can't shoot me.
I don't know. Why would the Russians give the Japanese his brain?
I don't know. This is the thing. I think it was bullshit, but it was apparently something he said. I don't know.
I'll find out. Crazy motherfucker, wasn't he?
Yeah. I'm quite, as much as he is crazy, I'm somewhat shocked at inefficiency of the Soviet Union.
Really?
Yeah.
You were shocked by inefficiency of the Soviet Union?
Well, I shouldn't be. I mean, looking at things like that Stalin used to do, for example, having competent people sent off to gulags, I shouldn't be surprised.
No, you know your history.
Yeah, I'm not.
Why did the Soviet Union fall?
Because it was incompetent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It
was a bloated bureaucracy.
Exactly. So, I mean, just look at fucking...
Chernobyl.
Yeah, look at Chernobyl, right? There they were like, oh no, nothing's wrong with this. They just cover everything up. Say nothing's wrong with it. And they were like, no, it fucking is. And, like, you know, people are going to die and America will know because you're going to get people all over Europe killed. So that's why they had to act and shit, you know, and they were like, anyone who said something was wrong, they were an enemy of the state, acting crazy, you know.
America will know. Oh shit, do something about it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But, yeah. So, yeah, that was Andrei Chikatilo.
Yeah, it's good.
Crazy ass motherfucker.
Yeah.
But, guys, what do you think? Do you think he was actually crazy or just evil? It was a fun one to do, and I enjoy doing a Russian accent.
Yeah, I really like that Russian accent.
You did, you
Yeah.
loved it. In Soviet Russia, accent do you. He's gone and Leslie's wank bank that has. But guys, thank you for being with us. If you do like the video, please hit the like button. If you do like us, please subscribe, hit that notification bell because it does shit to algorithms and all that stuff. Plus, you know when we've got this kind of crap up and we're talking shit. Big thank you to everyone who has joined us and who was already subscribed. And a big thank out to, I can't remember who it was, who says they come for the true crime stories, but they stay for the witty banter.
Mad bants.
Mad bants. Lads.
Lads. Chicken and banter.
Yeah. But guys, thank you so much for being here. Please reach out to us in the comments below, or you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, also on Instagram, or just email us at enterthedarkpodcast@gmail.com. It's that simple. And you can just get in touch with us, tell us what you think, send us abusive emails if you wish to, you know, then we've got your email address, can just respond to you.
And it makes us laugh.
Yeah, it does. Anything. But, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I've been Jan from Film Daddy. He's been Les from Tales from the Hangman. And remember, Mother Russia loves you.
Bye.
Могучий, царевский союз.